This is not your grave, but you are welcome in it.
Insurrection Era 2475 to 2525 CE. Carver Findings 2491. Dr. Elias Carver published a series of findings regarding the possibility of insurrection in the outer colonies. He summarized his findings with the following statement: unless the political situation throughout the colonies is stabilized, the government will collapse and civil war will rip human society apart. The findings, while not taken seriously at the time, were a precedent warning about the insurrection that spawned only a few years later. Dr. Catherine Halsey considered Carver's work somewhat prophetic, though she believed his conclusions needed additional refining. Orion Project, Second Class. The Office of Naval Intelligence reinstituted the Orion Project, an attempt to create engineered supersoldiers to boost combat effectiveness. Beginning with 65 candidates and later expanding to 165 and eventually to 300 total members at its peak. During their time in the project, the candidates received numerous physical augmentations throughout the pre-war insurrection. Though effective, the project was eventually terminated in 2506, primarily due to the side effects displayed by the candidates, including physical and mental illnesses. The mixed results of the Orion Project would lead Dr. Catherine Halsey to determine that the best way to eliminate the negative effects on the candidates was to only use children for training and augmentations, a tactic that would be implemented into the Orion Spartan II program. Far Isle Rebellion 2492 CE. Planet Far Isle. The rebellion was a major uprising on the outer colony world that is primarily cited in spurring the insurrection. In a show of defiance to the UNSC and the unified Earth government, the entire colony revolted against Earth's rule. When the UNSC was unable to put down the rebellion, Code Bandersnatch was declared, and the entire colony was razed with nuclear weapons. Jurl-Hanai joined the Covenant. Planet Doisak. Soon after the end of the devastating civil war between the Jurl-Hanai that caused a total collapse in the Brute society, the Covenant visited the Brute homeworld and invited them to join their ranks. Though some put up a resistance, most were more than willing to join the technologically superior and theologically devout Covenant after surviving through the loss of most of their own civilization. The Callisto Incident 2494 CE. January. A series of events involving the UNSC Callisto that is considered the first true insurrectionist attack. The UNSC Callisto is involved in an incident during the inspection of a trading vessel for contraband slip-space engine materials. This inspection, deemed unnecessary and invasive by locals under the investigation, resulting in the exchange of gunfire and the death of 27 merchants and 3 UNSC personnel. February. The following month, the UNSC Callisto was performing a similar inspection when a trading vessel led the ship into a trap, killing the crew and hijacking the UNSC vessel. March 2nd. In search of the UNSC Callisto, a battle group consisting of the UNSC Las Vegas, Buenos Aires, and Jericho entered the system and quickly found the pirated ship. During the chase, the Callisto led the battle group into a nearby asteroid field and used a planted trap of nuclear warheads in the field. The insurrectionists activated the trap, completely destroying the UNSC Buenos Aires and UNSC Jericho, and left the UNSC Las Vegas temporarily disabled. The UNSC Las Vegas, under the command of Lieutenant Preston Cole, utilizing unorthodox methods, was able to recover and ultimately complete the mission of recapturing the Callisto. Operation Charlemagne. Planet Eridanus II. Prelude, June 2494. UNSC Marine Corps Turncoat Colonel Robert Watts had joined the Secessionist Union and rallied the insurrectionist movements on the human outer colony of Eridanus II. Equipped by the rebel sympathizers within the colonial military authorities command hierarchy, Colonel Watts orchestrated a methodical and thorough series of assaults involving terrorist bombings, political assassinations, and kidnappings that heavily impacted Eridanus II's shipping routes. With the aid of their CMA contacts, the insurgents were even able to amass a small fleet of ships. December. The Eridanus government officially requested aid from the Unified Earth government as chaos spread across the planet. January 2495. Colonel Robert Watts and his insurrectionists had effectively taken control of the entire colony world. Operation 12 January 2496. The Unified Earth government finally responds to the Eridanus government's request for aid, deploying a large battle group of the UNSC Navy to the planet. The battle group engaged with the insurgent forces over the planet, an attack which succeeded at the cost of 4 destroyers. A number of subsequent counter-operations against the rebel forces began to break Colonel Watts' hold on the planet and splintered Allied secessionist factions by eliminating their leadership. Meanwhile, operatives of the recently resurrected Orion Project were deployed for the first time, of which included Avery Johnson. Inserted into the battle without being seen, the super soldiers engaged the insurrectionists in a swift and silent attack that resulted in a decisive victory for the UNSC. With only 1 casualty among the Orion operatives and several crippling losses for the rebels, the Orion Project operatives saw the destruction of an insurgent military base on the planet. The super soldiers were promptly extracted from the Eridanus II without being spotted. Aftermath. As a result of the operation, the Unified Earth government succeeded in regaining control of Eridanus II. However, Colonel Watts and many of its insurrectionist forces were successful in escaping to the Eridanus system's asteroid belt, where they escaped capture and continued to operate against the UNSC. Subsequently, Colonel Watts took control of the insurrection factions that lost their leadership during the UNSC operations, unifying them under a single banner as the United Rebel Front. Operation Veritas. 2497. Operation Veritas was a classified UNSC military operation undertaken by operators of the Orion Project during the insurrection. After the success of Operation Charlemagne, Orion operatives were found to be an effective tool in combating the insurrection. Consequently, during the remainder of that year and in subsequent years, Orion operatives were assigned to numerous other classified missions. Operation. Exact specifics of the operation are still listed as classified. It is known, however, that during the course of the operation, Orion Assets managed to secure a list of undercover Secessionist Union NOC operatives who are working in various high-level offices within the CMA. Repercussions. As a result of the discovery of the insurrectionist agents embedded within the CMA, the UNSC immediately moved to dissolve the organization and absorb its functions. With this, the UNSC made the discovery of the CMA involvement with the insurrectionist public. This signaled the beginning of the demise of the CMA, as due to security concerns, its resources were slowly shifted to NAVCOM or UNICOM, and its duties were relegated to patrolling the UEG's most distant colonies and providing logistical support to remote stations. As a result of UNSC efforts to dissolve the CMA, funding allocated to the Orion project was redistributed elsewhere. Therefore, in an unintended consequence of its own success, Veritas led to the eventual dissolution of the Orion project. Although the Office of Naval Intelligence's Beta 5 division eventually took control of the project, increasing the number of personnel to a peak of 300. Prohibitive cost, as well as deteriorating physical and mental conditions among the Orion operators, led to a gradual decline of the program. Operation Kaleidoscope 2502. A series of highly classified surgical strikes against prominent leaders of various insurrectionist groups that was initiated by the UNSC. Operation. The UNSC had decided to change its tactics when it came to combating the insurrection. Instead of expending great amounts of resources fighting the rebels in large-scale theaters of combat, a new emphasis was put on assassinating key figures. Gerald Ander, the leader of the Secessionist Union, was eliminated by Corporal Avery Johnson on March 13th. Project Orion would send Johnson to Planet Harvest to carry out the strike. This assignment was Johnson's final test for the Naval Special Warfare Sniper School. Johnson and another UNSC Marine, his spotter, acquired a position a fair distance from the target, and Johnson set up an M99 stanchion rifle. When Ander's truck passed by, Johnson took the shot and successfully killed Ander, effectively ending the threat posed by the Secessionist Union. Over the next 5 years, UNSC assassins targeted multiple high-value individuals, successfully killing targets like Moline Saul, Standish Cable, and Eleanor Kiff. At some point during the operation, components of the Orion armor were field tested by the operatives. Operation Tanglewood. Operation Tanglewood was a classified operation of the UNSC command during the insurrection in which Orion project operators battled insurrectionist forces. The specifics of the operation remain classified. It is known, however, that Avery Johnson was a participant in this specific operation. Project Orion is retired. 2506 CE. Despite the successful missions completed by the Orion assets, the project would be terminated in 2506. The surviving 165 personnel were distributed to posts throughout the UNSC. Many, such as Avery Johnson, would go on to enjoy long careers due to the positive effects of their genetic augmentation, although others would suffer severe effects, referred to as Boren syndrome, and be forced to retire. Operation Trebuchet. 21 January 2513. Eridanus II. The Unified Earth Government's military response to the numerous civilian insurrection uprisings in the outer colonies, spanning over 10 years and encompassing multiple planetary systems. Operation Trebuchet involved numerous Marine units and many vessels from the UNSC Navy in an attempt to bring the dissenting insurrectionists in line, effectively crushing all resistance to the Earth's authority in the outer colonies. Beginning with a large, armed uprising in the Eridanus system, it was one of the largest and farthest-reaching operations known to have been conducted by the UNSC in its long history. At first, the aggressive response was widely accepted. However, as the fight dragged on and the theater of operations expanded, the continuing operation became extremely unpopular with the human civilian population. Operation Trebuchet eventually became the central conflict for Earth's premier fighting force, the UNSC. Operation. Eventually, the United Rebel Front regained enough strength to attempt to overthrow the Eridanus government a second time. Colonel Robert Watts, intending to use Eridanus II as a base of operations for the URF and drag the CMA into a costly guerrilla war, launched an armed uprising on the planet. Fighting breaks out throughout the Eridanus system as rebels supporting the system break away from the unified Earth government and build a small navy of civilian crafts in an attempt to take over the system. However, the UNSC anticipated the attack and responded harshly, sending in a fleet of carriers, cruisers, and destroyers to the system to combat the rebel fleet. The overall battle occurred both in space and on the ground. The resulting battle pitted the UNSC against at least 100 smaller rebel craft. The UNSC defeated the rebels in the space combat with little difficulty. Meanwhile, the ground campaign was fought by the 9th Marine Expeditionary Force units, sent to the planet's surface in force, aiming to capture leaders of the secessionist movement and pacify the population. One of these units, the 1st Battalion of the 21st Marine Division, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Ponder, was involved in a disastrous mission to try and capture a rebel leader, the second in command of the URF in Elysium City. When Lieutenant Colonel Ponder questioned the father of the rebel's wife, the man revealed himself to also be aligned with the URF and threatened to kill himself and his own daughter with a grenade. While Ponder realized the man was bluffing, an attached sniper drew the opposite conclusion, shooting the rebel. In reaction, the rebel pulled the grenade's pin out on reflex, which ended in the leader's family being killed and Ponder wounded. UNSC Command would later demote Ponder for the event occurring. Conclusion. Ultimately, the United Rebel Front was unable to establish a single stronghold on the planet, and the UNSC managed to decimate most of their forces. Colonel Watts ordered for all remaining URF forces to retreat from the planet, and the remaining rebel ships left Eridanus II and were pursued by the UNSC Navy until they fled into Slipstream Straits. The remnants of their fleet regrouped under Colonel Watts' command and fled into the largest asteroid belt in the Eridanus system, where they established Eridanus Secundus. As the URF attempted to rebuild their strength, they would continue operating as pirates, raiding craft traversing throughout the system. Pariah, 2517, August. Planet Dwarka. At around the age of 6, Soren was living in the woods with his mother and stepfather, growing illegal crops on the farm. Unfortunately, Soren's mother became ill to a deadly local disease but had not been taken to see a doctor due to Soren's stepfather being too concerned for being detained for the illegal crops. The Dwarka law stated that symptoms of the disease be reported to the planetary officials, but by the time the stepfather had become convinced to seek medical attention, he was already too sick and had succumbed to the illness. According to official records, both Soren's mother and stepfather had initially dismissed the illness, assuming it was nothing more than a common cold. Despite treatments being readily available, it was believed that they were unaware of any official treatment plans existing due to their isolated residence. The stepfather, refusing to accept the loss, moved his wife's body into a side room and locked the door, telling Soren to leave his mother alone and to let her rest and recover. A few days later, Soren managed to steal the key from his drunken stepfather and checked on his mother. Discovering the body, he wept silently, and after some time he quietly relocked the door and returned the key unnoticed. Deciding that the death of his mother was on his stepfather's responsibility, Soren grabbed the sharpest knife in the kitchen, grabbed a stool, and silently went to his stepfather's bedroom. Standing on the stool next to the sleeping man, Soren overlooked him, knife in hand, sitting there for hours until the morning light began to creep in. Once his stepfather rolled over, exposing his neck, Soren struck, falling forward and jabbing the blade between the man's neck and shoulder. Soren immediately took off, vanishing into the forest, and watched as his stepfather emerged from the home furious. Removing the knife, the man sprayed biofoam into the wound and began searching the woods for the boy. Soren would continue to hide in the forest, surviving off the bugs found under logs. Few weeks later. One morning, Soren's stepfather emerged from the house, with a terrible cough and carrying a clear sickness. Later that day, Soren noticed his stepfather returned from work early. Getting out of his truck, he began walking towards the house until he collapsed onto the dirt, just a few yards away from his truck. The man tried to find the strength to crawl back to his truck, but was unsuccessful. Turning onto his back, he saw Soren standing over him. Begging his stepson to find medicine and aid him, Soren remained unmoved. The pleas quickly turned into threats, and then flattery, as he tried every tactic to get through to the boy. But Soren watched, just watched, as the man slipped into unconsciousness. Soren would remain there for 2 more days until his stepfather finally died. Taking the house keys from the man's pocket, he went inside and emerged from the house, dragging his mother's body outside to bury her. Soren would later bury his stepfather near where he had died in a shallow hole. Soren would continue to live alone for a few days in the house, building up enough strength on what food he could manage to find. When rations began to get increasingly low, he returned to the forest, making his way to a direction where a town might be. For weeks, Soren would walk through the forest, surviving on the bugs and grubs throughout. Eventually, he found a human-made track, following it to a township around 120 kilometers away from his home. Emerging from the underbrush, the townspeople saw him, rushing to aid the boy in tattered clothes. He would soon be turned over to psychiatrics for evaluation, neglecting to tell the entire truth of the ordeal, only revealing that he had been living alone for months after the passing of his parents, and that he had buried them both. Spartan 2 program begins. 17 August 2517. Elysium City, Eridanus 2. Dr. Catherine Halsey and Lieutenant Jacob Keyes go to Eridanus 2 for an ONI recon mission for the Spartan 2 project. Posing as parents, hoping to get their own child into the school, they observe John, subject 117, playing King of the Hill. It is here that Dr. Catherine Halsey introduces herself to John, noting his unique skill at luck. Dr. Catherine Halsey would note to herself that she shouldn't have used his name, and that it would not be wise to become attached to her subjects. August. Planet Dwarka. Dr. Catherine Halsey visits Soren 066 at his home, giving him the opportunity to be the only candidate to be given the choice to be recruited or not for a secret project. Taking the opportunity to be someone truly special, Soren accepts. Due to his living conditions, a flash clone was not necessary. September 12th. Epsilon Eridani System. Planet Reach. Reach Military Complex. 75 Spartan 2 candidates are chosen. All candidates are taken by ONI operatives and replaced with child flash clones. September. Planet Cascade. Saren Seelick would often be seen digging through the garbage cans for food. Neglected by her prostitute and drug addict of a mother, numerous calls to child services were made, but nothing changed. The only person who showed care for Saren was her teacher, Alcimene Leandro, who regularly brought food to school for her. Abducted to be a Spartan 2 candidate by an ONI agent named Mr. Teddy, she was designated Saren 019. Due to her living conditions, she was not replaced with a flash clone. Later in life, she would be known as Saren Osman, heir to Oni. Planet Sansar. Naomi Sensky, the daughter of Staffan Sensky, a family man living on Sansar, fails to return home from school in time. Abducted by an ONI recovery team for the Spartan 2 program, Naomi unexpectedly awakens and escapes her captors for a time, but is eventually caught and a flash clone is left in her place. After several hours of searching, Naomi is evidently found in a nearby town. However, Staffan begins to doubt whether this is his daughter after all, and after the child's death and his wife's subsequent suicide, he dedicates his life to uncovering the truth about Naomi's true disappearance. 24 September. Naval Officers Academy, Vieri Territory, Planet Reach. Spartan 2 candidates begin training. Throughout the candidates' training, it was noted by the psychologists that candidate Zarin 019 would often eat leftover food from the other candidates, a practice that candidate John 117 would regularly tease her for. Throughout the many years of harsh training prior to the body augmentations, candidates Ariana 111, Jai 006, and Michael 120 make several attempts to resist the training and escape, injuring trainers and causing theft and damage to at least one Pelican gunship. Ultimately, due to the trio becoming difficult to curb behavior and their lack of social integration, a decision was made to train them separately from the others and form them into their own group, with Jai 006 as their leader. Promotion of Spartan 2 candidate John 117. Wilderness Training Reserve, Vieri Territory, Planet Reach. 17 July 2519. Spartan 2 candidate John 117 is promoted to squad leader after a successful training experience in the frozen wilderness. It is here where he finds the desire to reach the rank of Master Chief Petty Officer, the highest rank of an enlisted personnel. Spread across the colonies. 25-24. Operation Trebuchet had resulted in over 1 million casualties caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, Colonel Watts had created more rebel installations on planets throughout human-occupied space. The United Rebel Front proved to be difficult to rout, and several other organized insurgent factions developed on other human colonies. Despite the best efforts of UNSC personnel, terrorist bombings continued and civilians were still caught in the crossfire, resulting in a growth of resentment directed towards the UNSC. As part of the operation, super soldiers of the Orion Project were deployed on the covert missions to engage insurgents. During one of these missions, Avery Johnson nearly succeeded in assassinating Colonel Watts. June. When it was discovered that several major insurrectionist cells were operating on the industrial and populous colony world of Tribute, a Marine battalion was posted at the planet, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Eboim, and supported by the corvette UNSC Bumrush. The UNSC's initial attempts at eliminating the insurrectionists had failed, leading to waves of bombings, assassinations, and UNSC raids in urban areas that resulted in high numbers of civilian casualties. During one of the battalion's operations on Tribute, the unit attempted to put a stop to rebel bombmakers. 2 special warfare squads, led by Staff Sergeant Avery Johnson and Nolan Byrne, were involved in the disastrous attempt in stopping the bombs. Although the rebel bomb makers were found and executed in a bomb shop in a struggling industrial town on Tribute, a truck line with the bombs escaped to a Jim Dandy restaurant in a nearby Casbah city. When ordered to shoot the rebel with the bombs, Johnson's hesitation led to a rebel detonating her explosives. 3 members of Byrne's team, as well as 38 civilians, were killed. Byrne was critically injured in the explosion, and Johnson was lightly wounded. Staff Sergeant Byrne and Staff Sergeant Johnson were pulled from the system and later sent to Harvest. Although the insurgents initially enjoyed some degree of support from a part of Tribute's population, it soon became clear that the rebels were often the cause of violence on the planet, and their support and popularity quickly decreased. In the meantime, some insurrectionist cells resorted to bolder, more deadly tactics, such as the bombing of a civilian liner in orbit over Reach, of which the terrorist attack was listed as an accident by the Office of Naval Intelligence.
Oni would have its soldiers, and I would have my solution.
May God have mercy on us all.